Hey guys, it's Melanie and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate it. Today we've got video 3 of the quilting series. We're going to talk about basting your quilt, and I've got a ton of information to share with you guys. But first I wanted to say a quick thank you to my sponsors. First sponsor is my Quilt Box, which is a monthly, or you can pick some different options, a subscription service where you get a box of quilty goodies. Really fun, high quality items in there. If you use the code Melanie, you will get 10% off of your first box, so that's really awesome. And in that box this month was a spool of Aurifil Thread, which is another sponsor of mine. Aurifil makes really great high quality cotton thread. They are my personal favorite thread, really beautiful colors, so they are a great thread to choose. And then lastly, Clover, which makes really great quilting notions. They have the Wonder Clips, which are a quilting or really any sewist favorite. They have really great notions to use in your sewing room. Okay, now let's talk basting. Okay, so basting is basically making a quilt sandwich. You have your quilt top, you have your batting, and then you have your backing, your quilt back. You're basically sandwiching them all together with the quilt top on, the right side facing out, and then your quilt back. So that then when you quilt all the layers together, then you trim your sides and then you bind it and you're done. So basting is a very important step because you want to make sure there's no puckering. You want to make sure that all of your layers are evenly pinned or spray basted around so that there's no major problems then when it comes to your quilting. Now before you get to the basting process, you have to have a batting. Now I recommend a low loft 100% cotton batting. I personally have used Warm and Natural and Warm and White the most out of all of my quilts. I get a good result with both of those options. They're the same brand, but one is like the natural color and then one is like a white. I like the result of that type of batting. It kind of depends on the result that you're looking for, how much loft you want, which is like how puffy it is. I like using 100% cotton throughout my entire quilt, so my fabric is 100% cotton, my thread is 100% cotton, my batting is 100% cotton. I like that, but there's a lot of different options, and part of it is your personal preference. I have also used Quilter's Dream batting a few times for quilts. It's a little bit more expensive than the Warm and White, Warm and Natural. You can get the Warm and White, Warm and Natural at Joann Fabrics. You could get the Quilter's Dream at like a local craft store, like a local fabric shop, or online. But Quilter's Dream has a lot of options to choose from and they're very high quality. Tons of quilters use that as their personal preference. I've used it, I think it's great. I don't care so much as long as it's a high quality, low loft, 100% cotton option. Also wool options, polyester options. The thing that you really just want to be careful of is if you use a low quality polyester, let's say, you might get some bearding, and bearding means like the little fibers from the batting kind of like are poking through your cotton, like your front, and creating, where you could feel the batting kind of like coming through your fabric, and you don't want that. You want this to be able to last a long time, to last and withstand washing and that kind of thing. So there's many great options out there, but personally this quilt is going to be using Warm and Whites. Now let's talk about the differences between pin basting and spray basting. There are two totally different ways that you can baste your quilt. I am a pin baster. I use large safety pins to baste my quilts. I have used spray baste I think one time just because I kind of wanted to try it out. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the pluses and minuses. Let's talk about spray basting. Spray basting is basically using a can of temporary fabric adhesive. It comes out in the wash. As long as you spray it lightly, it won't gum up your sewing machine. It's meant for this exact purpose, so they have formulated it to work that way. One can, every manufacturer kind of recommends it differently, but basically one can do about 2 queen size quilts, maybe 3, kind of depending on how much you use for each quilt. When you're spray basting, you want to spray it on the fabric and then put your quilt sandwiches together. It is repositionable, so you can move it around if you didn't get it quite right or things are crooked. One of the cons that I think about spray basting is that there can be an overspray. It is an aerosol can. There's not a lot of odor to them, but you're still kind of like breathing this in. It's getting in your house, or if you have an outdoor space to do it. I have never really had a good space to be able to do it. and I didn't want any overspray getting on my floors. I didn't really like, you know, spraying it in my house with my kids around, and so I just have never really gravitated toward that as an option for me personally. But if you have a place to do it outside really easily, some quilters swear by this option. I've heard a lot of straight line quilters that really like to use straight lines, they're not doing the free motion as much, think that this is a better option for quilting in that style. Also, spray basting has a lot less weight to it. So you can imagine when you're putting in tons of safety pins, it does make the quilt heavier when you're trying to work with it on your sewing machine. So I think that's another positive thing. If quilting bothers your shoulders or your arms at all, then maybe spray basting is a good option to try if the weight is an issue for you. The cans can cost anywhere from $10 to $15. It depends on what brand you use. The brand I have heard the most about is called 505. That's the one that when people spray base, that's usually the brand that they mention. I can't really say which one is the best because I am not a spray baster, but if you wanted to try it out, I would try that brand first and see how you like it. I like to pin baste. I use big safety pins that I purchased at the craft store, a quilting store. There's lots of different ones. There's curved ones. It doesn't matter, whatever you like, whatever is a preference for you. I like that I kind of invested up front. I bought them all at one time at the beginning, and then I have them all the time. Sometimes I can tell when I go to use a safety pin, it's dulling and it's, you know, it's not going through as easily, and I just throw that one away. And every once in a while I get new ones. I also like that I always have it. I'm not gonna run out and have to go to the store. And I like that I can do it inside and I don't have to worry about any of the other things about spray basting. It is, however, like I mentioned before, heavier when you're trying to deal with your quilt while you're quilting it, as well as when you are quilting, you have to stop and pull the pins out. So that can be a little annoying after a while. If you had spray basted it, then you don't have to worry about that. So I definitely think that's a con to the pin basting version. Okay, so we've talked about types of batting and pin basting versus spray basting. I also wanted to just bring up that you could also have your quilt long armed, and a long arm is basically a giant frame, and somebody who has a long arm machine can put your quilt on the frame, and then they basically move the sewing machine around and make the design on your quilt, versus how we're going to do it where we're going to be moving the quilt underneath the sewing machine. So long arm quilters, you can generally get a very precise, very special result when you're doing it. If you have a very specific design in mind that you want to achieve, a long arm option is a great option. Also, there's lots of quilters who have long arms. They do it as a side business. It helps to support their families. It's a small business. You're kind of helping out the community. It's a really good option. It's about 2 to 5 cents per square inch. So if you have a long armor that you want to use, then they will have a description on their website about how it needs to be prepared and all of the details. I'll run through them really quick just so that you guys have an idea of what it would be like, because you wouldn't baste at all and you wouldn't quilt it at all. It would come back to you all quilted and sometimes trimmed, sometimes not, depends on the quilter. But you want to have your front square, meaning that your quilt top has 90-degree angles on the corners as best as you can, and then you want to have your back. Your back has to be 4 to 6 inches larger all the way around your quilt to allow for the shrinkage as it's all being quilted and for the backing to sit on the quilt frame properly. Help your quilter out and really follow the instructions that they have lined out for you. Also, they often have an option where you can just add the batting to the price so that you don't have to ship the batting or purchase it ahead of time. You can just purchase it from them. They'll include it. Then once it arrives back to you, it's done. I have had 2 quilts long-armed, one from Stephanie at Late Night Quilter and one from Sarah Bluprint Textiles. They have long-armed quilts for me that I wanted a specific design, and they're just really good at what they do, so they did a great job. I'll have them linked below so you can check them out. But, you know, there's lots of other options as well. If you are in a quilting community, somebody might have a long arm. So just be aware of that as an option. But I do think that as you're learning how to quilt, you should know how to baste and how to quilt things on your own so that you're aware of the process. Okay, now that we've gotten through all of that stuff, let's talk about how you would go about basting your quilts. So if you're going to be quilting on your home machine, you do need to have your backing be larger than your quilt top. It needs to be at least 2 inches, and that's really cutting it close. You really should have it more like 3 to 4 inches larger all the way around. Your batting also needs to be larger all the way around as well. Now, I'll be honest with you, piecing the quilt back is one of my least favorite parts of the whole quilting project. I don't know why. It seems annoying to me. I don't know why, but you have to, you end up having some waste because it doesn't always fit right. Anyway, there are quilt backings that are 108 inches wide, so you don't have to piece your back. It could be one whole solid piece. They sell those. The voile is nice because it's actually 54 inches wide, so you don't have to use as much than the quilting cotton, which quilting cotton's a lot of times you end up having to piece a lot of it together in order to make a large enough quilt back. So I have all the measurements. I'll leave those down below in terms of how you're going to piece your quilt back, because if you use voile, it's going to be a little bit different than if you use cotton. But basically, moral of the story is your back needs to be 3 to 4 inches larger than your quilt top all the way around, no matter if you're doing this twin quilt that we're doing or any other project. Now, if it's possible, you do want to square up your backing. I didn't do that in this video. A lot of times it's unnecessary in my opinion, but if you do have any pieces on your back that need to be centered or not crooked at all, you do need to have your back squared so that then when you place everything on top, then you have it all aligned correctly. All right, so that's it for this portion. Let's jump over to my living room where I moved the furniture out of the way and rolled up the area rug so I had a nice big space on my tile floor to be able to baste this quilt together. So let's jump over there and I will show you how I did it. Okay, so now we're gonna prepare our backing for basting. Now, if you're going to be using voile, you need about 4 yards, and voile is actually wider than cotton. I think in my initial video I said that it was the same width of fabric as regular quilting cotton, but I was mistaken. It's not. It's 54 inches wide. It's wider, which is actually better because you can purchase less. So the first thing that we need to do is trim off our selvage, because this selvage edge is where we're going to need to piece the quilt top together. So I have mine already cut into 2-yard sections. So we need to cut the selvage off. Now set that one aside, and now you want to cut this selvage off. I just had cut mine into two-yard sections for a total of 4 yards, but two 2-yard sections just to make it a little bit easier to trim the selvage off. Now when you piece your backs together, your quilt back, the best thing to do is a 1/2 inch seam allowance rather than a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It just adds a little extra strength to the seam. Here are those selvage edges that we cut. So I already know that those lines are straight. It's a nice clean edge. And so you can go ahead and take it to the machine and sew down a 1/2 inch. Now the voile can be a little bit slippery, so just make sure that your edges stay aligned nicely, and then you can press your seam open or to the side. It's up to you. Now here I am starting to tape the back down using painter's tape, or you can use masking tape, down onto your hard surface floor, keeping everything taut but not stretched. So you just want to be careful of that as you go along. Okay everybody, so you can see the bottom of my quilt is behind me. This is the wall that I'm using, and you can see I'm using painter's tape to kind of tape it down. So the painter's tape doesn't work quite as well on the wall as it does on the regular quilting cotton. It grips to the quilting cotton a little bit better, so just keep that in mind. But what you want to do is make sure everything is smooth and taut, but not too tight, because if there's any wrinkles that get under there when you're doing your quilt sandwich, it's going to cause problems with your quilting. So what you want to do is make sure, I'm going to show you right now how to kind of pull it taut and then tape it into place, and then we'll add our batting and our quilt top. If you have a hard surface, this is going to be the best way to baste your quilt. I've moved my area rug out of the way and I'm here in my living room. So any sort of hard surface that you have, move some furniture out of the way, get this all done at one time. There's my cat walking across right now. have the back of the quilt all nice and smoothed out on the floor, taped down. And I'm gonna show you how I place the batting on here so we don't screw any of that up. So I have this folded in a quartered. Okay, so you fold it in half, and then you fold it a quarter, and then I'm gonna show you how I place it on the quilt. By the way, this batting has already been cut about 3 inches larger than my quilt top. So I know that where I place this will be the right size. All right, so now we have it placed on here. Now we want to smooth it out. Smooth, smooth, smooth. Smoothing is your very best friend. Okay, now we have our batting on there. Everything is smoothed out. So now you want to fold your quilt top the same way that you did your batting, and then do the same thing. Okay, now again, you want to go from the middle and smooth going outward. So another little tip, you've got this seam right here on the back of your quilt. Make sure that it's lined up with the quilt so that the seam hits the same point on both sides of the quilt. Insert the safety pin. I can feel that it's gone through all the way through the 3 layers to the tile, and then I bring it back up. Now I recommend placing pins 3 to 4 inches apart across the entire quilt. I probably will put one in every single patchwork square, that way it will make it easy. This will take some time. It will take quite a few pins, but I'm just gonna put a podcast on my phone, chill out, and get it done. All right, guys, now I know that there was a lot of information in this video, but don't freak out, don't stress out, it's fine. If you have some mistakes along the way, it's not a big deal. The quilt is gonna still look beautiful. The thing is, you're gonna be learning. If you're a beginner, you're gonna be learning all these things as you go. Have I made quilts where there was a pucker in the back? Yes, I have. Have I done things not quite right along the way? Yes, of course. That's part of the process. It's part of how it happens. I'm here to help you. So if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment section below. But I know that quilting, there can be a lot of steps. It can take a good amount of time, but enjoy the process. Have fun doing it. You know, you're going to make mistakes along the way. It's going to happen. It's like learning any new skill. I mean, amazing quilters that do everything perfectly have been doing this a very long time. I've made dozens of quilts, and my quilts aren't perfect. Okay? That's not what it's about, right? It's about making something beautiful that can bless our families. And it can be a creative outlet. And it's something that's so fun for us to do because it's therapy. It's healing for our soul. It's fun. Okay, so don't stress out. I know there's like a lot of steps and we still have the quilting and binding process to do, but I just wanted to give you that little bit of encouragement. A quick thank you again to my sponsors, my Quilt Box, Aurifil, and Clover. If you use the code Melanie for my Quilt Box, you'll get 10% off of your first box. Really cool, right? If you have any questions, comments, anything, leave me a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That's a really great way for me to get some feedback on what you think of this series. If sharing it with your crafty friends is a great way to kind of get the word out and help support this channel, I really, really appreciate all of that. And I'll see you in video 4, where we will quilt this bad boy.